Hi, I'm Jess.
And I'm Bryn.
Welcome to another week.
The lines between business and life aren't always clear, especially when you're building something from the ground up.
At the DOUBL Digest, we're talking about what it really takes to run a brand, navigate challenges, and show up fully, both in work and in life.
Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another week.
We're excited to dive into everything that went on last week. We had a really busy week in Toronto with Next AI, and we're doing some exciting initiatives around hiring and getting ready for our raise. And then we also have some fun personal topics to go through. Bryn's husband's birthday is today, so we've got a good cake story for you.
Awesome. Okay, let's dive in. Maybe let's start with Next AI, because I feel like that was the biggest thing recently. So we got into this program. It's one of Next Canada's programs. They have the AI program, the Founders program, and the Next 36, which is more of a new grad program. So we got to become part of the AI cohort, which is for AI-enabled businesses, which is great because it's providing us with a lot of resources to develop our AI further. So, how have you found the program so far? Tell us what you're learning.
Yeah, I think the funniest thing to mention and why you should always just go for things is the application process required a business founder and a technical founder, and neither Bryn or myself are really technical. So the majority of the teams in Next AI have like a true full stack software engineer on their team who does all of their coding, whereas we're more of a hire out that role. So I feel like the most daunting thing of the week was we're doing a machine learning course, which is very intro for most of the people and terms that we have never heard in our entire lives. So I'm excited to upskill, but definitely challenging. So next week we're going to be doing a Python assignment, so that should be interesting. But I think it's definitely such a great opportunity for us to like go full throttle into our next goals and milestones and really have like all the resources at our disposal. We have a AI scientist in residence, which has been incredibly helpful. So we have kind of like a sounding board and somebody to help like review things like job descriptions, help us with the interview process, help us understand technical words a little bit better. So that's been really helpful. So I think that's one of the things that I'm most excited about through the program. And then Bryn's going to be tackling kind of like the business side. So we had a founder mindset course. And yeah, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think it's a good example of the kind of scrappiness and resourcefulness that you can get, like that you as an entrepreneur need to have, because we know that we are a tech-enabled business without a true technical team, and we know what we want to build. We just don't know how to build it necessarily, like actually tangibly. And so we could have hired, a really big team to get us there, but instead we found a program that provides us with like what gets us to the next part. So I think that's really helpful. And I think the other nice thing about accelerators, and we've been through quite a few, is you get kind of the cohort network as well. So, you get to be around other founders that are building really cool things, and you can basically create coworkers for yourself. So that's something I'm looking forward to as well. Like you have the formal mentorship, but also the informal, just collaboration with other mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. And this past week, we also did mentor speed dating. So through the program, we get 2 mentors, and they can be either on the business side or on the tech side. So that was really fun and like a great opportunity, I think, for all founders is like how can you get mentors or advisors who have so much more experience in certain areas that can provide guidance or just like even thought-provoking questions that might help like get your business further along.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before on the podcast about how as an early stage founder, hopefully for most early stage founders, you're getting lots of advice, right? Whether solicited or unsolicited. And I think we've been lucky to have a lot of really great mentors, but you also have to kind of stay true to your conviction and break through the noise to focus on one thing, because it's really hard when you're hearing advice from lots of different people, often conflicting advice. And so there's a lot also with trusting your gut and continuing down the path that is important. But then it's kind of like that idea of climbing the ladder of like, okay, we know what our next milestone is. How are we going to get that? What are the resources that we need and how do we find them? So I think the mentorship piece is something where you have to find the right people. And one of the questions we were asking mentors is like, do you believe in the idea? Because I think that's so critical, right? That somebody has the conviction along with you. And in the founder mindset course, and it's only been one class so far, I feel like what was the main takeaway for me for that was you have to believe in yourself. You have to understand that it will be really hard and you'll second guess yourself over and over and over again. But that's kind of where you lean into the discomfort. And, there will be other people who have the same idea. And so you just have to move as quickly as you can so that you ultimately come out on top.
I think that's a really good point. And I think on the technical side, I think this past week was a good learning because I don't identify as technical, like neither of us identify as technical. It's easy to like give up the reins in that area a little bit and be like, all of these people know more than I do. And I think it's a good mentality to not want to be the smartest person in the room and surround yourself with smart people. However, to your point, it's so important that you do give yourself credit for like how much you know because you're in this business and like, X person may have just heard your intro and doesn't actually know a lot but has like a lot of opinions. And I think it's like that's happened to me before where like multiple times where it's so easy to get lost in that and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, this is what we need to do or this person knows best. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's just noise, like you said. And I think it's so important to be able to differentiate and just like stay focused. And that's served us well. Like we've strayed before, but like if we can stay as focused as possible on one clear goal, like that's always served us so well.
I mean, I think that's also the problem inherently with labels is you can get affixed to the label. And I think I had that a bit with entrepreneur. I don't know if you did. Like, did you call yourself an entrepreneur from like 2020 when we incorporated the business?
No.
Like, and
I
that's
didn't for so long.
Yeah, right? I didn't either. I think going full time makes you feel like more qualified to call yourself an entrepreneur, but we were pulling, like 40-hour work weeks on top of full-time jobs when we had them. So yeah. I feel like those labels are so funny, and I feel like sometimes it can guide you astray because then you don't believe in yourself, right? And it all comes back to that idea of conviction. I felt that way too with running. Like I didn't call myself a runner for a long time. Like only I think until last year when I started doing like a bunch of run clubs did I feel like I was a runner. Like not even running a marathon made me feel like a runner. Like it's just such a weird thing with labeling. And I mean, that's what we're trying to do with sizes too. I think people can get really hung up on what size they're wearing and what that means about them and what their self-worth is. But I think it can be really toxic.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think another interesting thing we're doing this week or the past couple of weeks that kind of is along these same lines is we're hiring for this technical role. And I feel like the label piece is so interesting because we were recommended this book called Who. I actually don't know the rest of the book title, but basically Who hiring book. If you look that up, it'll come up. And it talks a lot about the current hiring process and how it's almost like voodoo because like somebody can be, and it's similar to dating, like where somebody could be really great on paper but like execute horribly in the role, and it's really difficult to figure that out just by having conversations. And they have a funny example where like one candidate had gone through interviews with like 5 executives and in total spent an hour of their time talking about their skydiving hobby. So it's like, of course, you want to make sure you can have a relationship with that person, but then maybe you're not really being effective in your selection. So the book really talks about how can you be really clear on the actual deliverables that you need. So like, this is our goal, we need to execute it by then. And how can that person give you an example of another time in their work or school or whatever it may be that is like, for example, achieve 90% success rate with customer service. And maybe that person was awarded the customer service award at their last job, or like, I mean, that's super relevant, but maybe something like along those lines. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing that was interesting was talking about competencies. And that's more of those intangible personality traits, such as trustworthiness or communication. Say you're hiring somebody for sales, like do you want that person to be a shark and aggressive, or do you want that person to be incredibly kind and incredibly honest? Like what kind of team are you building? And those qualities can sometimes even outweigh like previous experiences.
Yeah. As a shout out to our hiring, what are the roles that we're hiring for and what are we looking for in terms of those intangible skills?
Yes, that's a really good question. So our number one hire is a machine learning engineer. And essentially the biggest task for this person is going to be creating this AI reinforcement learning model, which is essentially taking our current process and automating it. And I think when thinking about those competencies, communication is a really big one, considering the rest of the team isn't technical, so we need somebody that's able to take really technical jargon and translate it into layman terms. I think the person also needs to be very like a self-starter. Bryn and I have learned that many times over, that being in a startup is just different than being in a different corporate role. So somebody who's willing to take initiative, somebody who can think outside of the box and really work autonomously. And then I would say, I think the other couple would be like adaptability and being reliable.
Yeah, just to double click into initiative, because I find you're somebody who really displays initiative very well, and I think like the last 2 weeks show that. Like you've become like a beginner coder / AI enthusiast / HR aficionado, right? Like, and that was all a lot of self-learning and self-teaching. So do you think initiative is something that people are born with, or do you think you can work on it like a skill?
It's a really good question. I think initiative is driven a lot by passion. I think like having a good fit from like a goal standpoint is really important, because I think if you're not motivated by your role or your day-to-day or the result that you're trying to achieve, then you're going to be less likely to take initiative. I do think it definitely takes, yeah, that's a good question. I think
maybe like a curiosity as part of that.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, honestly, I think about this all the time, the nature versus nurture, and we talked about it in psych, which was one of my undergrads, and it's hard because you can get yourself into this crazy thought spiral where, okay, so let's say you can develop initiative if you're a curious person. Okay, but what about the trait of curiosity? Like, where does that come from, right? Like, okay, can you develop the trait of curiosity? If so, like, where does, like, at what point are you at a foundation level where you're just born that way? Mm-hmm. And I feel like once you start trying to get down to the lowest level, like I always get stuck in a mind cycle, and it's hard to extrapolate what is that nurture versus nature at the heart of something. Like if somebody's a driven person, like where does that drive come from? Okay, so let's say their parents, helped them set goals as a young kid, and that established drive. But not everybody would take to that. So like what is inherent in you that allowed you to use goal setting as a way to increase your drive? Like there has to be, kind of something there where you resonated with that approach.
Yeah, no, it is a really tricky thing to think about. I'm also reading this book called Compound, The Compound Effect, and they talk about it a little bit in the sense of like, how can you create like a micro improvement every day that over 2 years leads to a really big change? And the example they gave was like, picture like say 3 women who are all friends, and they're all like sort of like at the same level when it comes to their happiness around their job, their happiness in their marriage, their like physical like weight. And then one of the women decides to cut like 200 calories from her diet every day by like she's drinking once a week less, she cut out chips or like whatever it is, and she's decided to do a 15-minute walk every single day. The second person increased their casual drinking, and again, not noticeably, like just an extra glass of wine on Fridays, and like stopped working out. And then the third person does nothing. And then it's like, 6 months, a year from then, you don't necessarily see that change, but because the compound is so small, but then after 2 years, it's almost like a dramatic change. And you see the same, I feel like it's really applicable to entrepreneurship in many ways, but it's like that idea of the overnight success where like all of a sudden, like, wow. And then people are like, oh, they just got lucky. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't see the like 10 years of compounding that went into that overnight success. And like in this example, 2 years later, that one woman is like her physique is slightly more trim. She had like higher endorphins from going for walks every day, so her marriage is thriving because she's putting more effort into her relationships. The second person is less happy in their marriage because they're feeling more sluggish from not working out and eating more. They've gained weight. So it's like this crazy ripple effect. And then the last person is just as is. And that's, in the books, they talk about that being the most dangerous place to be in, because you're not unhappy enough to make a change for the positive, and then you're not that happy. You're just like trucking along, and that like is the trap that a lot of people get stuck into. So yeah, I don't know. Like I think drive can be seen as like this huge thing, or it can be little things, and then I think as you start seeing incremental improvements, it's almost like a confidence booster. Like you get more and more confident in yourself and your capabilities, and you strive for betterment in all areas of your life.
Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think, kind of the cycle that's happening, right? But it's hard if it's such a micro improvement to see. So I feel like that's why when people do go on a weight loss journey, they're taking progress photos, because it's not something that you see on a day-to-day basis. But it's hard to think sometimes about what to do for parts of your life. Like for entrepreneurship, for example, like we should do a better job of recording, like what our wins and losses were each week, which is kind of what this podcast can serve as, because we can like listen back to old episodes and be like, okay, we've like really come so far. And that's similar to a book I read about how high achievers, like the biggest way to really set goals should be a combination of not just looking at where you want to go, like what your ideal is and where you are from that ideal, but also looking at how far you've come before in your past. So like where you were to where you are now versus where you're going. Because if you only look ahead, you never are happy because you're always chasing the next thing. But also the confidence piece. And I think confidence is so important.
Yeah, the reflection piece. I think something for me with entrepreneurship is that it's forced me to be more present. Like I think I'm a planner and I like knowing where I'm going. I like goal setting. I'm result oriented. So I feel like entrepreneurship just like doesn't allow for that. Like obviously you can have goals and you need to plan, but so often things don't go to plan or timelines change. So, and at the end of the day, I think it's, life is the journey. So that achieving a goal or result lasts like 2.5 seconds and it's like on to the next. And we even experienced that recently where we'd set like a bit of a goal for January, and we were like, if we're just, we have bras in market, we have good reviews, we have people loving it, we have like at least 10 sales, like we're gonna be so thrilled. And like we achieved that, and then we were like, oh, I wish we had 50 sales.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the new goal that you forgot that you even achieved your old one. So I feel like that's been a personal thing that I've been trying to work on, because otherwise you're like almost never happy, because you're always just like,
totally.
I'll be happy when this happens.
Yeah, it's like a happiness. You're just chasing something that doesn't really exist. And we did hit our Q1 sales target already, so that's great, because we're not even through the month of March yet. And I think the other nice metric to have is that we covered payroll with sales for the first time. So, which seems kind of crazy, but for a long time we were covering sales with our like personal savings and our paycheck when we were working. So to have sales cover like operating expenses, at least at the payroll level, it feels like a big win for us.
Yeah, it's such a huge win. Really exciting.
Yeah. Back to the confidence piece. We are opening our raise hopefully next month, and it's been something I've been feeling like a bit anxious about, because you hear so many horror stories from people, and then you kind of go in with the mindset of like, okay, well, this is going to be really hard, whereas I feel like you need to have the mindset that like this will go great. But then it's hard because sometimes you have the mindset of this will go great and it doesn't, so then you're like trying to set yourself up for success. But I think part of the being bold is just ripping off the Band-Aid, right? And knowing that like, okay, and that's what entrepreneurship really is like you don't have all the answers when you start. So you start at something and then you course correct, and then you see, the feedback on that, and then you course correct again. But I was thinking that the fundraising journey to me feels a lot like Schrodinger's cat, the physics experiment of like, is the cat, if you put a cat in a box and you come back to it in a week, you don't know if it's alive or dead until you open the box. And I feel like that's what the fundraising journey is for me right now, because I don't know if they'll go well or not until I start it. So it is both going well and not going well at the same time. Like until you really have that, like a validation point, it can be either.
Yeah, you're in limbo.
Yeah. And in my personal life, I'm trying to do that with hockey, because I play hockey every Sunday morning, and I play in a co-ed league, which means it's like majority men. And I was never like a super strong hockey player. I was like always like I played house league, and I was like B level. And I've been trying to increase my confidence in like puck handling. So typically what happens, like I'll be past the puck and I'll immediately like fling the puck away, because it's almost like a hot potato, because it's almost a form of rejection when you're like, when you have the puck on your stick and someone actively takes it away from you. So if you can like get rid of it before somebody can take it away, then like you didn't fail. So I'm trying to encourage myself to like hold on to the puck for like 2 seconds longer each game, or like 3 seconds longer each game, And also when somebody else has the puck, like just going for it, even if you think, that there's no way you'll get it from them. And it's been surprising to me, even that like micro improvement, right? How sometimes like nine out of 10 times maybe it doesn't work, but like the 10th time, like I am able to carry the puck through the blue line at least and get it into the corner, or I'm able to like stop the other person from, like there was a time in a recent game where I went into the person and they ended up fumbling the puck and I took it away from them and I couldn't get it in the net, but I got enough rebounds that eventually my teammate came and got it in the net. So sometimes you just also have to set yourself up for success by getting started so that you can then use the data to like make improvements.
Yeah, 100%. And you get better by practice, and like back to that piece of like not feeling like an entrepreneur until we'd put in certain hours, and like not feeling like a runner until you'd like been a part of enough run clubs and marathons. Like there's definitely that piece of there's gonna be a day one for everybody. Like you're never gonna be good your first time. Like you're like the
you weren't
pancake.
born. Yeah,
like the pancake thought, like you burn the first pancake. And I feel like
I haven't heard
like,
that pancake one before.
No? Oh,
no.
Yeah, you burn your first pancake because it's always like too hot and like you can't figure it out.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah, and I think like you've already done so much work in networking and like speaking to people about raising, and like you've already done a lot of that prep work. So I think you should already be so proud of like where you are, and of course it's going to be a learning journey, but like again, like you said, we're always going to pivot. And I feel like entrepreneurship is almost one of those things where it's like you can't fail because you're just going to pivot unless you give up.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good one.
But yeah, that's interesting. You're learning so many things too as an entrepreneur. Like, I think one of the skills is like being comfortable in the uncomfortable, because like you're not going to know how to do almost everything at some point in the journey.
Yeah, which is a good segue into, we had some kind of decisions, like quite a few decisions we had to make in the last couple of weeks from kind of a marketing standpoint. So British Vogue reached out to us, which was really exciting, to feature our product in British Vogue, both the print and the digital version. However, it was a paid opportunity. It was a paid feature, and so we did have to assess how we felt like that would, whether that would benefit us. We also had the opportunity to do a booth at the National Menopause Show, and there were like different sizes we could do with different price tags. And then Dragon's Den also reached out to us last week to ask if we would audition. And, we don't have the information or data to know how each of those will perform. And so it's using whatever we have available to us to make those decisions. So that I think was an interesting example of not knowing.
Do you want to walk the audience through the decisions that we made and why?
Yeah, so for British Vogue, obviously it's British Vogue, so more of a UK-based market, and we don't have a presence in the UK right now. So, some people could say, well, it's good to at least get your foot in the door and have people like spread awareness. But I think because we're in an industry where there is so many options and there is so much noise, that unless you have the ability to do a conversion, that person won't necessarily like remember you or stay with you. So it felt like a bit of a leaky bucket in terms of losing people. Also, it was going to be in more of their wellness and beauty category, which didn't feel like as good of a fit for us in terms of our product. And while the digital piece I think would help with, we could use the logo and have a backlink, the price point just didn't feel worth it at the time. But definitely something I think we would revisit in a year, especially if we were to launch in the UK quite quickly. For the National Menopause Show, that one made a lot of sense for us because we can sell product on the spot. And one of the issues with selling apparel or in a D2C environment is that there's not as much urgency always with shopping. Like, yes, sometimes somebody, like, their bra breaks and they immediately need a new bra. But for other people, maybe the clothing's not great, but it's been good enough for the last couple of months. So there's not a need immediately to switch. So I find pop-ups can be really helpful because then it's an opportunity for people on the spot to just make that decision, and you can have kind of like a conference discount code or something like that. And then for Dragon's Den, maybe you can speak to that one.
Yeah, this is the second year Dragon's Den's reached out to us. We're big fans of the show. We watch lots of our founder friends on there. We've seen like lots and lots of episodes. And we just don't feel that we're at the right stage of our business that it would be a success. And we don't want to be skewered on national television. So we feel that after this year, once we've really automated our process, and we just are a very like tech heavy business that requires a lot more R&D than the typical business. And we are in market, but very, like, we like to even say we're pre-launch in ways, because we did it through a crowdfunding platform, and we're not pulling on any of those marketing levers because we don't feel that we're capable of handling a high demand because we haven't automated through AI just yet. So we'd love to go on. We definitely see ourselves going on at some point, but we don't feel like this is the right year. And
And for British Vogue and Dragon's Den, both of them, since they are, a marketing channel where you won't always have that one-to-one connection and conversation opportunity that you would have at like the National Menopause Show. I think one of the other issues is that our product is very much a V1 product, and while it feels incredible and like the materials are beautiful and we hear that from customers and it feels like they're wearing nothing, it doesn't always display very well, right? There's that seam that's on the outside, which we know is a problem. And so we also don't want people to look at the product, which I think doesn't necessarily photograph as well as it feels, right? Or like shows as well as it feels, and then kind of write us off. It would be better for us to get to like a nicer V2 product. And part of that is also that we don't have a technical designer on the team. We have a technical pattern maker, and in apparel you need both. So that's another lead that we got this week for a technical designer who has experience. So like lots of balls in the air, and just we'll be in a better place, I think, in the next year.
100%. And I feel like Dragon's Den, regardless of like if your episode goes well or not, it's still like so much exposure. So you want to be ready to like handle that demand regardless of it.
Totally. Let's talk about some personal things. It's beautiful here in Toronto right now. I can see the lake from my window, and it's nice and blue. The sun's shining. It feels like spring. What have you been doing from a spring cleaning perspective?
Yeah, it's also beautiful in Kelowna. I feel like I went to an event, and this woman who was doing kind of like the intro was like, winter was so cute this year. Like, it was just like, she was just cute because we had like maybe 2 days. It was so short. So yeah, I'm really excited for spring. I feel like what I've been doing, this weekend I'm going to do a true like big spring clean, but something I've been doing on my frugality journey, and that I've actually really been enjoying, has been going through, like, I'm a bit of a skincare fanatic, so I have skincare and makeup that I've accumulated over the years of different serums I've tried and makeup colors that I've tried. I now have my kind of ride or die products that I typically replace, but I realized like I'm out of my brow gel, and I was like, oh, I actually have another brow gel. And there's something that feels so good about like finishing a product to the end, or like, like wearing like once I had like a pair of leggings that I wore till they had holes in them, and I was like, I feel so good and like proud that I've like run this item into the ground. And so I've been trying to really like go through all of my items, and if, for example, even like I find this is a good trick, and TikTok's so good for these types of things, like I have a retinol that's like for sure expired, but I saw that this like one woman was like putting it on her arms to help with like dry skin on her arms, like underneath moisturizer. So trying to like repurpose things in a certain way to finish them, and then kind of like going through each serum, or like if I run out of my favorite blush, instead of replacing it immediately, it's like I actually have like a couple other blushes, and like can I use it on my like eyelids or my lips, or like if I don't love the color on my cheeks, and then just going through everything. And then I love the idea of having that like capsule makeup kit at the end where I've like gone through everything. And like these are truly my core products that I love.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like I'm going on a very similar piece with clothing as part of my frugality journey. Because obviously, like in an entrepreneurial budget, you don't really have money to buy new clothes. And so I've been trying to reuse my clothes in different ways to make my wardrobe feel new again. And so one of the ways I've challenged myself to do that is by trying to create more monochrome outfits. So I typically would do, like a jean or a black trouser or a beige trouser with a top of a different color. But now I'm trying to do, a monochrome outfit. So I have a lot of like creams, blues, blacks, and reds in my closet. So it makes that a lot easier that I can mix and match tops and bottoms. But that's been really fun because I feel like I'm rediscovering fashion a bit. And it's kind of that challenge. Like your challenge was how can I use it on more body parts? And my challenge is more of how can I wear this with something I haven't worn it with before. And that's been kind of fun.
I love your monochrome outfits recently. I think they're so cute. And it's one of those things that sometimes there's items in your closet that you haven't touched in so long because you can't figure out how to style them. And then like that's happened to me so many times where I do a closet clean out and I'm retrying on a bunch of clothes and I'm like, oh, I actually love this. Like I forgot I had this. And then it's just sometimes, yeah, you forget about it because it's not like an obvious pull in the morning. So if you just take those extra minutes to think about like, how could I style this in a way that would make me feel good? And then it's like, yeah, a whole new outfit.
Yeah. I try to do that too with seasonal items. Like I put my summer things away in the winter so that when it's summer again, I'm like rediscovering them and they feel new, even though they're not, just because I haven't seen them in a while.
Yeah, I was thinking about starting to do that too. And also just creates more like space in your closet. I've definitely been like, I feel like I've ignored items in my closet just because it's too crammed.
Yeah,
like, I just
totally.
don't know where they went.
Yeah.
The items on the far sides like never get touched.
Yeah, sometimes less is truly more. I feel like that's something else we learned this past week. Just to go back quickly on the business side was sometimes, actually, I believe all the time simple is better, and the more simple something can be, the easier we can wrap our minds around it. So I've been trying to do that a lot with the storytelling we're doing on Double. Like it is a bit of a complicated business model and a complicated product, and so how do you simplify that as much as possible so that people just immediately get it? And there's a really good example of this during our Next AI onboarding, because we did like a startup challenge in groups where we had to come up with a product that we just kind of made up that had environmental benefits, and then we had to present that back to the group, and it was like 45 minutes, so it was super short. And there were a bunch of ideas that we had that could have been, they were all good ideas, but they were all complicated, like they had these multiple layers to them, and we ended up just picking something super simple. And I always think I have the tendency to go towards like overcomplicating something, but I remember actively thinking like, okay, let's pare it back, let's keep it simple, and then we ended up winning the startup challenge. So that was a good like applying some knowledge and then seeing how it performed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we learn that so many times with customers, like you said, like customers. And I feel like as a customer, I've come across this so many times where it's like I've come to a website and if I don't immediately understand what this product is and what it does, like you bounce. Yeah, you lose interest.
Yeah. Where I'm not very good at the simplifying is in my cake decorating. I always take on really complicated recipes. I don't know, it's just a challenge that I love to try. It's a medium that I'm not very comfortable in because it's both artistic but also scientific, in that you have to follow like measurements for recipes very closely, and I'm just not somebody who thrives in those kinds of constrained environments. But also
baking is so hard, like truly. Yeah,
but also I think the artistry in cakes also comes quite rigidly in that, like, you have to follow, like, you have to do a crumb coat usually and then cool that for a certain amount of time, and then you have to give yourself a lot of time to do the decorations, and it always takes a lot longer, I think, than I at least think it will, and I'm more of like a fly by my pants, like, do things quickly kind of person, so it's a good challenge for me to slow down and be thoughtful in the moment when I'm doing something. Anyway, so it's my husband's birthday and I'm making him a cake, and I decided to do a golf themed cake, which is like totally out of my wheelhouse. But I also, just to, again, make things overcomplicated, wanted it to be a surprise, and it's really hard to surprise somebody you live with with something that you're baking. So it actually went really well last night because he went to the gym, and I had just gotten back from a networking session when he'd kind of like left for the gym. So I baked the cake, and then there was kind of a weird chemical smell in the apartment that I had texted him about. So that was actually good groundwork to lay, because I then lit a candle. And when he came home, I had literally pulled the cake out of the oven, and he came home like 30 seconds later. Like, I just checked it to make sure it was done. So I like turned off the oven, and then I hid it under some oven mitts, and he wanted to make a smoothie, but I was like, oh, I'll go shower first. So then I had time to hide it in my office. And then, he's like, oh, it like smells kind of like pancakes. I'm like, oh yeah, that's like the candle I lit. And then he's like, the oven's warm. Did you bake something? And I was like, oh no, I just like made eggs for dinner. And then it just like,
oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah, it worked out so well.
The smell would have been so hard to cover.
Yeah. So the candle, like, that worked perfectly. So he still doesn't know that there's a cake. I did have to hide it though under lemons in the oven, so it has an indent in it, so it's not flat. So it's a bit, has a bit of a curve to it, but I did my buttercream this morning. I got the crumb coat on, so later this afternoon I just need to roll out my fondant and then try to turn the cake into a golf course. So I'll see how that goes.
Easy peasy.
Easy
Love
peasy. It. Yeah.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I think that'll be
he'll really appreciate it.
Yeah, part of the frugality journey, right, is making things from scratch, and it comes with more heart that way.
And I feel like you're underselling yourself. Bryn made my birthday cake, and I thought she bought it. It was so good.
Also, you just need the right tools. And I think I'm still learning how to use the tools, but I got like the smoother, which really makes a difference, I think, with especially buttercream frosting to make everything look smooth, and then having the right like piping tools, and then doing a bit of practice, because the pancake theory, like the first rose I did on your cake was horrible, so I'm glad I didn't do it on the cake. I did it off the cake.
Clever.
And just getting like the swing of things. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining in, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Building something new, whether it's a business brand or a personal brand, is always a journey.
We appreciate you tuning in to the Double Digest. If this episode resonated with you, let us know with a review, share with a friend, and subscribe to keep up with more behind the scenes and real talk.
See you next Monday.